Tell me honestly, do you think I am pretty? The sentence appeared alone on a glowing computer screen, and for one unexpected moment, it carried more weight than every billion-dollar contract ever signed inside Hayes Dynamics. Ethan Walker had repaired thousands of computers across the suburbs of Chicago during the past 15 years, but he had never forgotten the lesson his late father taught him when he was still a teenager. Just because something is visible does not mean it belongs to you. At 39 years old, Ethan lived a simple life that rarely attracted attention. Every weekday began before sunrise in a modest home outside the city, where he packed school lunches, braided his 8-year-old daughter Lily's hair as neatly as he could, and made blueberry pancakes that never looked perfect but always disappeared from the plate. After dropping Lily off at elementary school, he drove his aging pickup truck from one repair appointment to another, carrying a weathered leather toolbox that had become more familiar than any office desk. His customers rarely remembered the truck, the toolbox, or even his name. They remembered that he solved problems quietly and never charged them for repairs they did not need. That reputation had slowly traveled farther than Ethan ever expected. On a cool Thursday afternoon, his phone rang while he was replacing a damaged hard drive inside a neighborhood library computer. The caller introduced herself as Grace Donovan, executive assistant to Victoria Hayes, the Billionaire chief executive officer of Hayes Dynamics. One executive laptop had suffered a critical operating system failure only hours before an international board presentation. Internal technicians had attempted several recovery methods without success. The files stored inside were considered irreplaceable. Grace asked whether Ethan could come immediately. Ethan checked the time before answering. He could finish before Lily's after-school reading club ended. That was all he needed to know. Less than 40 minutes later, he stepped into one of the most impressive corporate headquarters in downtown Chicago. Towering glass walls reflected the afternoon sunlight while employees moved quickly through spotless corridors carrying tablets and laptops worth more than his pickup truck. Nobody paid much attention to the quiet technician in the neatly pressed blue work shirt. He preferred it that way. Victoria Hayes greeted him inside a private executive office overlooking the skyline. She was younger than he expected, composed, elegant, and unmistakably exhausted. Her light blue sweater replaced the formal business jacket usually seen in magazine interviews, but nothing could hide the pressure resting behind her calm eyes. She explained the problem without unnecessary drama. The laptop contained years of engineering research, executive planning documents, and personal archives that had never been backed up properly. Ethan listened without interrupting, then connected an external recovery drive before beginning a careful diagnostic scan. Minutes passed in comfortable silence. Outside the office, phones continued ringing and elevators carried executives from one meeting to another. But inside the room, only the gentle hum of cooling fans filled the air. A recovery window finally appeared. Damaged directories slowly rebuilt themselves one by one until an old, unsaved draft unexpectedly surfaced during the restoration process. Before Ethan could minimize the screen, a photograph appeared. Victoria stood outdoors beneath autumn trees, smiling naturally without cameras, makeup artists, or reporters. Below the picture, a single unfinished sentence remained frozen inside a forgotten document. "Do you think I am pretty?" Ethan looked away almost immediately. Without reading another word, he closed the recovery window, secured the restored files, and continued rebuilding the operating system as though nothing unusual had happened. Across the room, Victoria quietly watched his reflection in the office window. She could not see exactly what had appeared on the screen, but she noticed the brief hesitation, the respectful silence that followed, and the complete absence of curiosity. In a world where nearly everyone tried to learn more than they were supposed to know, the stranger repairing her computer had just chosen not to see something that could never truly be unseen. The recovery process finished without another interruption, and Ethan carefully verified every restored folder before disconnecting the external drive. He closed each diagnostic window one by one, documented the completed repairs with quiet precision, and handed the laptop back to Victoria Hayes with both hands, as though returning something far more valuable than a machine. Everything essential has been recovered, he said calmly. I also repaired the damaged operating system and replaced several corrupted system files. I recommend creating automatic backups from now on. Victoria accepted the computer without immediately opening it. Instead, she studied Ethan's face, searching for the smallest clue that he might mention the forgotten photograph or the unfinished sentence hidden inside the recovery files. He simply waited with the patience of someone who had spent years allowing customers to verify his work at their own pace. She finally opened the laptop and examined several important engineering documents, financial presentations, and archive project folders. Every file appeared exactly where it belonged. Nothing had been renamed. Nothing had been copied. Nothing suggested anyone had explored beyond what was necessary to complete the repair. Did anything unusual appear during the recovery? Victoria asked carefully, keeping her voice steady despite the quiet uncertainty growing inside her. Ethan considered the question for only a moment. Recovery software sometimes reconstructs temporary files before placing them back where they belong, he answered honestly. That is normal when restoring damaged storage. Victoria watched him closely. Did you open any personal documents? Ethan met her eyes without hesitation. Only the files required to confirm they could be restored successfully. Everything else remained your private property. The answer was simple, respectful, and impossible to challenge. It contained neither denial nor unnecessary explanation. For reasons Victoria could not fully understand, that calm honesty unsettled her more than any clever excuse ever could. Grace Donovan entered quietly with several printed reports waiting for Victoria's signature. The board meeting begins in 30 minutes, she reminded her. Victoria nodded before looking back toward Ethan. Thank you for coming on such short notice. Ethan smiled politely as he packed away his cables. I'm glad I could help. Grace prepared the payment documents, but Ethan glanced at his watch before signing the invoice. The clock read 2:20 in the afternoon. He folded the paperwork neatly and slipped it into his toolbox. If everything looks good, he said, I should get going. My daughter finishes reading club at 3 o'clock, and she always looks for my truck before she walks outside. Victoria blinked almost imperceptibly. Most people delayed meetings for her. Investors rearranged flights to fit her schedule. Entire departments adjusted deadlines around her calendar. Yet the man standing in front of her measured time, according to an 8-year-old girl's school dismissal, instead of the world's richest clients. You never miss pickup? She asked before realizing the question had escaped her lips. Ethan smiled with quiet warmth. Not if I can help it. She spends enough of her day waiting. I never want her wondering whether I am coming. Those words lingered in the office long after he closed his toolbox. Victoria simply nodded. Drive safely, Mr. Walker. Thank you, Miss Hayes. He left the executive floor as quietly as he had arrived, disappearing into the elevators without looking back. A few minutes later, Victoria walked toward the window overlooking downtown Chicago, still holding the laptop against her side. She opened the hidden recovery folder once more and found the unfinished draft exactly where she had forgotten it years earlier. The photograph was still there. So was the question she had written during one lonely evening after reading cruel comments about her appearance despite another successful product launch. She stared at the words for several silent moments before slowly closing the document again. Ethan Walker could have mentioned it. He could have apologized for seeing it, joked about it, or used the accidental discovery to begin a more personal conversation. Instead, he had done something she rarely experienced in a world built on curiosity and ambition. He had quietly protected a stranger's dignity without asking for recognition. And for the first time in many years, Victoria found herself thinking less about the laptop that had been repaired and more about the man who had repaired it. The following Saturday arrived with clear blue skies and the first cool breeze of early autumn, bringing a welcome pause from another demanding week. Victoria Hayes accepted an invitation to attend a community science and technology fair sponsored by several local schools and nonprofit organizations. Public appearances were nothing new to her, But this event required no speeches about quarterly earnings or ambitious expansion plans. Instead, it focused on encouraging children to explore engineering, creativity, and problem-solving. Grace Donovan quietly arranged the schedule, expecting Victoria to spend less than an hour greeting volunteers before returning downtown. Neither of them realized the afternoon would leave a far deeper impression than any board meeting had in years. Across the fairgrounds, Ethan Walker finished setting up a simple demonstration table covered with old computer parts, screwdrivers, colorful circuit boards, and a few inexpensive laptops donated by local businesses. Rather than dazzling children with expensive technology, he patiently showed them how everyday computers actually worked. Every curious question received the same thoughtful answer, whether it came from a confident teenager or a nervous second grader. His calm voice never became rushed. His smile never appeared forced. Several parents quietly watched from nearby, surprised that someone with such technical knowledge spoke without arrogance. A few yards away, Lily wandered between booths carrying a small notebook where she carefully collected stamps from every science activity she completed. Her bright yellow sweatshirt stood out among the crowd as she laughed easily with other children. Every few minutes, she glanced toward her father, always finding him exactly where she expected. That certainty seemed to matter more than any prize offered that day. Victoria noticed them almost immediately after arriving. At first, she only recognized Ethan because of the familiar blue work shirt he seemed to wear everywhere. Then she saw the little girl running toward him with excited energy after finishing another activity. Without thinking, Ethan knelt to her height before listening with complete attention as she proudly explained how she had programmed a tiny educational robot to follow colored tape across the floor. He celebrated her achievement as though she had just received a national award. There was no distraction in his eyes, no glance toward his phone, no impatient hurry to end the conversation. For those few minutes, the rest of the busy fair simply disappeared. Victoria remained several steps away, observing quietly without interrupting. Grace noticed her unusual silence. "Would you like me to introduce you?" she asked softly. Victoria shook her head. "Not yet." They continued walking through the exhibits until Lily accidentally dropped her notebook while running toward another demonstration. Before anyone else could react, an elderly volunteer bent down to retrieve it but struggled slightly with the movement. Ethan immediately stepped forward, gently accepting the notebook while also offering the volunteer a steady hand. "Take your time," he said warmly. "There is no rush." The older man smiled gratefully before thanking him. Ethan never looked around to see whether anyone had noticed the small act of kindness. He simply returned the notebook to Lily with a playful smile. "Looks like your science passport almost escaped." Lily laughed before hugging the notebook tightly against her chest. "I think I wanted to learn something too." Victoria could not help smiling at the simple exchange. She had spent years surrounded by people eager to impress powerful executives. Yet Ethan behaved with exactly the same quiet respect, whether speaking to a billionaire, a child, or a stranger. As the afternoon continued, Lily proudly completed the final activity on her card and ran toward her father once again. "Daddy," she said with shining eyes, "my teacher says engineers make the future." Ethan gently tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear before answering with the same calm certainty that had guided every decision in his life. "Good engineers build machines," he said. "Great people build trust first. The machines come later." Victoria heard every word. She looked down at the event program still resting in her hands, but the printed schedule no longer held her attention. Somewhere between the repaired laptop and an ordinary afternoon at a neighborhood science fair, the definition of success she had carried for so many years had quietly begun to change. The science fair ended as the afternoon sun settled lower across the park, painting long golden shadows over folding tables and colorful tents. Families slowly gathered their children while volunteers packed away equipment one careful box at a time. Ethan Walker loaded donated computers into the back of his pickup truck with the same quiet attention he had given them throughout the day. Lily sat on the tailgate, eating a small cup of vanilla ice cream, swinging her legs happily while reading through the notebook she had filled with stamps and handwritten observations. Across the parking lot, Victoria Hayes remained inside the back seat of her waiting car longer than expected. She watched Ethan thank every volunteer before leaving, never mentioning that he had spent the entire day teaching without accepting a single dollar. Grace Donovan noticed her employer staring through the window. "You have another dinner meeting in 45 minutes, she reminded gently. Victoria nodded, but did not immediately answer. "Grace," she finally said, "have our information security department review the maintenance report from Mr. Walker's repair last week." Grace looked surprised. "Is there a concern?" Victoria slowly shook her head. "No, I simply want to know exactly how he handled the recovery." By Monday morning, the internal audit was complete. Hayes Dynamics maintained detailed digital security logs for every executive device. The report showed that Ethan had opened only the minimum number of files necessary to verify successful restoration. The temporary recovery folder containing the forgotten photograph had remained active for less than 6 seconds before being closed permanently. There had been no external storage connected after that moment, except the approved recovery drive. No files had been copied. No screenshots had been created. No internet activity had occurred during the repair. Even the system logs confirmed that he had immediately returned to restoring business data without exploring anything unrelated to his assignment. Victoria quietly read every page herself. At the bottom of the final report, one sentence from the security analyst caught her attention. Independent technician demonstrated exceptional adherence to client privacy standards. She read the sentence twice before setting the report aside. During her career, she had signed contracts worth billions of dollars because legal departments demanded confidentiality. Ethan had honored the same principle without signing anything more than a standard service invoice. Later that afternoon, Grace entered the executive office carrying several folders. "There's something else," she said. "Our accounting department noticed Mr. Walker reduced his own invoice." Victoria looked up. "Reduced it?" Grace nodded. "He removed the emergency service surcharge because the repair finished faster than expected. Most contractors would have billed the original estimate." Victoria leaned back slowly. The amount was insignificant compared to her company's daily operating budget, yet the decision lingered in her thoughts far longer than any financial report. She picked up the invoice and noticed Ethan's handwriting beside the adjustment. "Fair work deserves fair payment. Nothing more, nothing less." The words were simple, almost ordinary, but they reflected the same quiet character she had witnessed at the science fair. Later that evening, after another successful executive meeting and countless congratulatory messages from investors, Victoria returned alone to her apartment overlooking the Chicago skyline. Awards lined one wall. Frame magazine covers filled another. The city lights shimmered beyond floor-to-ceiling windows, yet the spacious rooms felt strangely silent. She placed Ethan's invoice beside her laptop before preparing a simple dinner she barely touched. Without planning to, she opened one of her older interview recordings online. The interviewer had praised her leadership before asking an unexpected question about balancing success with public attention. She remembered forcing a confident smile while pretending cruel headlines about her appearance had never mattered. They had mattered more than she ever admitted. She closed the video and looked toward the city beyond the glass. Somewhere across Chicago, Ethan was probably helping Lily finish homework or preparing tomorrow's lunch before another ordinary workday. He owned no corner office, no private driver, no international reputation. Yet his life seemed anchored by something she had spent years searching for without realizing it. Respect that did not depend on applause, success that did not require admiration, and a quiet dignity that remained unchanged whether anyone was watching or not. Nearly 2 weeks passed before Victoria Hayes found another reason to think about Ethan Walker, yet somehow his quiet presence had never fully left her mind. During those days, she attended investor conferences, approved multi-million-dollar expansion plans, and appeared on 2 national business programs where reporters praised her leadership and vision. Every interview ended with applause. Every headline celebrated another achievement. But each evening her apartment seemed just as quiet when the cameras disappeared. One Wednesday afternoon, Grace Donovan entered her office carrying a folder containing proposals for Hayes Dynamics' annual community partnership program. Local schools, libraries, and nonprofit organizations had submitted requests for technology grants. Victoria turned the pages with professional efficiency until one familiar name immediately caught her attention. Lincoln Community Learning Center. She remembered the science fair. "Who teaches the computer workshops there?" she asked without looking up. Grace checked the attached schedule. According to the volunteer coordinator, Ethan Walker has been leading weekend classes for almost 3 years. Victoria looked up in surprise. "Volunteer classes?" Grace nodded. "Yes, they're completely free. He refurbishes donated computers and teaches children whose families cannot always afford newer technology." Victoria closed the folder for a moment before making an unexpected decision. "Move tomorrow afternoon's planning meeting to Friday. I would like to visit the center." The following afternoon she arrived without media announcements, photographers, or corporate banners. She wanted to observe, not be observed. The Learning Center occupied an older brick building that had once served as a neighborhood elementary school decades earlier. The classrooms were modest but welcoming, filled with carefully repaired computers arranged on long tables. Ethan stood near a whiteboard explaining basic programming concepts to a dozen children ranging from 8 to 14 years old. He spoke with the same calm patience she remembered from the science fair. No child seemed afraid to ask questions because no question was treated as unimportant. Victoria quietly remained near the doorway while the lesson continued. Ethan encouraged every small success with genuine enthusiasm, celebrating curiosity more than perfect answers. When the class ended, several parents thanked him before gathering their children. One little boy shyly handed Ethan a folded piece of paper decorated with colorful stars drawn in crayon. "My mom said I should give this to you," the boy whispered. Ethan accepted it with a grateful smile and waited until the family had left before opening the note. Victoria happened to be close enough to notice the handwriting. "Thank you for fixing our computer. Now I can apply for jobs from home again." Ethan carefully folded the note and placed it inside the front pocket of his worn leather toolbox beside several other folded papers that had clearly been saved for a long time. Before he closed the pocket, another small sheet slipped onto the floor. Lily hurried over and picked it up before he noticed. "Daddy, you almost lost this one," she said cheerfully. Ethan smiled. "Thank you, sweetheart." Victoria could not help glancing at the paper before Ethan tucked it away again. Written in uneven childhood handwriting were the words, "My daddy fixes computers, but he really fixes people's bad days. I love him because he always comes home." The simple sentence settled quietly inside Victoria's heart. No award she had ever received had sounded more meaningful than those innocent words. Lily slipped her small hand into Ethan's as they prepared to leave. "Can we stop for hot chocolate?" she asked hopefully. Ethan laughed softly. "Only if you promise to tell me everything you learned in art class today." Lily grinned. "That is easy because I have a lot to tell you." Victoria watched the father and daughter walk toward the parking lot together, their conversation growing quieter with every step until it disappeared into the cool afternoon air. She remained standing in the doorway long after they were gone, realizing that the wealth she admired most could never appear on a balance sheet. It lived inside moments like these, where trust was earned one ordinary day at a time, and where a little girl measured success by only one question that mattered. Would her father always come home? So far, he always had. Autumn settled gently over Chicago, and with each passing day, Victoria Hayes found herself noticing small moments that had once escaped her attention. She began leaving the office a little earlier whenever possible, walking instead of immediately stepping into the waiting car, listening to conversations in the lobby instead of rushing toward the next meeting. Success still surrounded her, but it no longer sounded as satisfying as it once had. One Thursday afternoon, after concluding a series of executive presentations, she looked at the clock and made another unexpected decision. "Grace," she said quietly, "would you ask Mr. Walker whether he has time for coffee tomorrow afternoon? No business agenda. Just coffee. Grace smiled with polite surprise before making the call. The following morning, Ethan answered while organizing replacement parts inside his workshop. He listened carefully before responding with the same calm courtesy he always carried. "Please thank Miss Hayes for the invitation," he said warmly. "I appreciate her kindness very much. Unfortunately, I cannot tomorrow afternoon. Lily has her school music performance, and she has been practicing for weeks. I promised I would be there." Grace relayed the message exactly as he had spoken it. Victoria remained silent for several seconds before asking, "Did he suggest another day?" Grace shook her head. "No, he only apologized for the scheduling conflict and wished you a pleasant afternoon." There was no attempt to impress her, no eagerness to rearrange his life around hers, and no hesitation in choosing his daughter over a meeting with one of the most influential business leaders in the country. Instead of feeling offended, Victoria experienced something entirely unfamiliar. She admired him even more. The next afternoon, curiosity quietly guided her toward the elementary school auditorium where Lily's performance was taking place. She did not enter the building or announce herself. She simply remained outside, near the entrance, after asking the front office whether visitors were allowed to wait in the public courtyard. Parents gradually arrived, carrying flowers, balloons, and cameras. Some checked business emails while waiting. Others spoke hurriedly into their phones. Ethan arrived nearly 30 minutes early with a small bouquet of white daisies wrapped in brown paper. He sat on a wooden bench beneath a maple tree and turned his phone completely off before slipping it into his pocket. For him, the next hour belonged entirely to Lily. Victoria watched from a respectful distance, hidden behind rows of colorful autumn shrubs. She saw children running through the courtyard laughing before the doors opened. When Lily spotted her father, her face brightened instantly. She hurried toward him with the carefree excitement only children possess. Ethan stood, handed her the flowers, and knelt so they were eye level. Although Victoria could not hear every word, she caught one sentence carried gently across the cool afternoon breeze. "No matter how you sing today," Ethan said with a reassuring smile, "I am already proud of you." Lily hugged him tightly before disappearing inside with her classmates. Victoria lowered her eyes for a long moment. She remembered standing alone backstage during charity galas years earlier, rehearsing speeches while wondering whether anyone in the audience truly saw the person behind the public image. Somewhere along the way, she had learned to measure her worth through achievements because there had been little else to measure. Ethan was teaching his daughter something entirely different. Love was not earned after success. It came first. Achievement simply grew inside it. As parents slowly entered the auditorium, Victoria quietly returned to her car without disturbing the afternoon. During the drive back downtown, she looked out across neighborhoods filled with ordinary homes, school buses, playgrounds, and families beginning another evening together. Her penthouse apartment waited high above the city with every comfort money could provide. Yet for the first time, she understood why Ethan had declined her invitation without regret. There are moments that cannot be postponed, conversations that cannot be rescheduled, and promises that become the foundation of a child's entire world. Somewhere inside a school auditorium, a little girl would soon search the audience for one familiar face. Ethan Walker would be exactly where he had promised he would be, and somehow that simple act carried more quiet strength than every standing ovation Victoria Hayes had ever received. Several days after Lily's school performance, Hayes Dynamics announced its annual Family Innovation Day, an event where employees, volunteers, educators, and local nonprofit organizations gathered to celebrate technology, education, and community service. Victoria Hayes personally expanded the guest list for the first time, asking Grace Donovan to include several neighborhood learning centers that had partnered with the company over the years. Lincoln Community Learning Center appeared quietly among the invitations, and Ethan Walker accepted only after confirming the event would not interfere with Lily's weekend schedule. On the morning of the gathering, the headquarters looked different from its usual fast-paced atmosphere. Children explored robotics displays, families experimented with science exhibits, and engineers patiently answered endless questions from curious young visitors. Laughter replaced hurried footsteps, and for a few precious hours the enormous glass building felt less like a corporation and more like a neighborhood gathering place. Ethan spent much of the morning helping children assemble simple electronic kits, while Lily eagerly moved from one exhibit to another, proudly wearing a visitor badge that seemed far more exciting to her than any expensive souvenir. Victoria noticed them from across the exhibition hall and smiled before walking over. "I'm glad you both could come," she said warmly. Ethan returned the smile with his usual calm courtesy. "Thank you for inviting the Learning Center. The children have been talking about this all week." Lily looked up at Victoria with bright curiosity. "Daddy says you build really amazing things here." Victoria laughed softly. "We try our best." Lily looked around at the impressive displays before asking with complete innocence, "Do people who work here ever get scared?" The unexpected question made Victoria pause. Sometimes, she admitted honestly. Even grown-ups feel uncertain. Lily nodded thoughtfully as though that answer made perfect sense. "Daddy says everybody gets scared sometimes. What matters is whether you stay kind anyway." Victoria glanced toward Ethan. He simply smiled without realizing how deeply those ordinary words had landed. Later that afternoon, while families gathered near the auditorium for a youth robotics demonstration, Lily wandered beside Victoria, examining photographs displayed along a hallway celebrating the company's history. Magazine covers, executive portraits, and major achievements stretched across several decades. Lily stopped in front of one elegant portrait of Victoria taken years earlier during an award ceremony. She tilted her head slightly before looking up. "Miss Hayes." Victoria turned with a gentle smile. "Yes." Lily studied the photograph for another moment. "You look nice there." Victoria thanked her quietly, expecting the conversation to end. Instead, Lily continued with the honest simplicity only children possess. "But you look happier today." Victoria blinked in surprise. "What makes you think that?" Lily shrugged gently. "Pictures can smile, but real people smile with their eyes. Daddy told me that a long time ago." Before Victoria could answer, Lily added another thought that seemed almost accidental. "Sometimes people wonder if they are pretty because nobody tells them they are enough. Daddy says people who make others feel safe are always beautiful." Time seemed to slow around them. The busy hallway faded beneath the distant sounds of conversations and children's laughter. Victoria felt her heart tighten with quiet emotion. Ethan had never mentioned the forgotten sentence he had accidentally seen during the computer repair. He had never hinted at it, never repeated it, and never shared it with anyone, not even the daughter who trusted him with every secret in her own small world. Whatever wisdom Lily carried had grown naturally from the values Ethan lived each day, not from knowledge of Victoria's private vulnerability. At that moment, Ethan approached, carrying 2 cups of hot chocolate. "I hope I did not interrupt anything important," he said with a warm smile. Lily accepted her cup happily before running toward another exhibit with several new friends. Victoria watched her disappear into the cheerful crowd before quietly looking back at Ethan. There were countless questions she wanted to ask, countless thank yous she wanted to express, but none of them seemed necessary. Some truths did not require explanations because they had already been proven through quiet actions. Ethan had protected a stranger's dignity from the very beginning, and now, standing in the middle of a building filled with remarkable inventions, Victoria realized the rarest gift she had encountered all year was not extraordinary intelligence or technical skill. It was the simple choice of a good man to leave another person's hidden wound exactly where it belonged, untouched and safe. The Monday after Family Innovation Day began like every other busy week at Hayes Dynamics, until, just before 9 o'clock in the morning, computer screens across multiple departments suddenly displayed synchronization errors that refused to disappear. Shared engineering files became inaccessible. Several development servers stopped communicating with one another, and project teams found themselves unable to retrieve critical design documents needed for afternoon presentations. The company's internal technology division reacted immediately, isolating affected systems while senior engineers gathered inside the operations center. Victoria Hayes remained calm, as reports continued arriving from every floor. No customer information had been compromised, and security monitoring showed no evidence of outside intrusion. Yet something deep inside the company's network had quietly interrupted normal operations. For nearly 3 hours, the engineering teams analyzed logs, restarted services, and compared system configurations without identifying the underlying cause. Grace Donovan entered Victoria's office carrying another status update. "The engineers believe they are getting closer," she said carefully, although her expression suggested otherwise. Victoria looked toward the city beyond her office windows before making a decision that surprised even herself. "Please call Ethan Walker. Tell him this is not an emergency request. Ask whether he is available only if it does not interfere with his family." Grace smiled softly before placing the call. Ethan answered during a scheduled maintenance visit at a neighborhood dental office. After listening to the situation, he checked the time. Lily would remain at school for another several hours before after-school art club. "I can stop by for a little while," he replied. "I will need to leave by 3:30 to pick up my daughter." Less than an hour later, Ethan quietly entered the operations center carrying the same weathered leather toolbox that had followed him through countless ordinary workdays. Several engineers briefly glanced toward him before returning to their monitors. Nobody questioned why a freelance technician had been invited. Victoria simply greeted him with a grateful smile. "Thank you for coming." Ethan nodded politely before reviewing the available system reports. He asked surprisingly few questions. Instead, he listened as each engineer explained what had already been tested, carefully avoiding suggestions until everyone had finished speaking. He walked slowly between workstations, occasionally examining network diagrams displayed on large monitors, while the room remained unusually quiet. After several minutes, he noticed that every affected server had received the same automated configuration update during the previous weekend. "May I see the archive deployment schedule?" he asked. An engineer immediately opened the records. Ethan compared several timestamps before gently pointing toward one overlooked setting inside the synchronization policy. "This update appears to have introduced conflicting time validation rules between older storage clusters and newer application servers," he said calmly. "The systems are healthy. They simply no longer agree about when shared files should be considered current." The room fell silent as engineers quickly reviewed his observation. Within minutes, they confirmed that his diagnosis matched every unexplained symptom. After carefully adjusting the synchronization policy inside a controlled testing environment, shared files gradually began reappearing across the network exactly as expected. Relief spread through the operations center as employees applauded the restored systems. But Ethan only smiled modestly while helping document the corrective steps so the internal team could prevent the issue from returning. Victoria approached him once operations had fully stabilized. "You solved in 30 minutes what we could not solve all morning," she said sincerely. Ethan shook his head with quiet humility. "Your engineers solved it. I only noticed one detail because I was seeing this system for the first time. Fresh eyes sometimes help." Before anyone could offer additional praise, Ethan looked at his watch. It was 3 o'clock. He carefully packed away his diagnostic cable and closed his toolbox. "If everything is stable now," he said warmly, "I should head out. Lily finishes art club soon, and she will be waiting by the front doors." Victoria smiled with genuine understanding. "Go. She should never have to wonder whether you are coming." Ethan thanked her with a grateful nod before walking toward the elevators exactly as quietly as he had entered. As the doors closed behind him, the engineers continued discussing technical solutions. But Victoria found herself thinking about something entirely different. Brilliant minds could restore complicated computer systems, yet only a remarkable heart could remember that no professional achievement was ever more important than keeping a promise to a child. 2 weeks later, Hayes Dynamics held its annual Leadership and Community Excellence ceremony inside the company's largest auditorium, bringing together employees, educators, nonprofit partners, and families from across Chicago. Unlike previous years, Victoria Hayes personally insisted that the celebration focus not only on innovation and financial success, but also on the people whose quiet integrity strengthened the community every single day. The stage was decorated with simple autumn flowers instead of elaborate displays, and the audience included children from local learning centers sitting beside senior executives in tailored business suits. Ethan Walker almost declined the invitation, believing the event was intended for company employees rather than independent contractors, but Grace Donovan personally assured him that Victoria hoped he and Lily would attend as honored guests. They arrived together wearing their best clothes, though Ethan still carried himself with the same quiet humility that had defined every moment since the day he first stepped into headquarters carrying a weathered leather toolbox. Lily held his hand as they found their seats near several families from the learning center, completely unaware that the afternoon would become one of the most meaningful memories of her childhood. After recognizing engineers, teachers, volunteers, and community organizations, Victoria returned to the center of the stage holding a small envelope instead of the prepared speech resting on the podium. She looked across the audience before speaking with unusual honesty. Success is often measured by numbers, she began. Revenue, growth, market value, awards, and recognition. I have spent many years believing those things defined achievement. Recently, someone reminded me that the strongest foundation any person can build is trust. The auditorium grew remarkably quiet. Victoria continued, her voice calm but deeply sincere. Several months ago, I met someone whose technical skill solved an important problem for this company. That alone deserved appreciation. But what changed me was not his intelligence. It was his character. He quietly protected another person's dignity when nobody would have known if he had done otherwise. He treated every individual with the same respect regardless of position or influence. He reminded all of us that true leadership begins long before anyone receives a title. She smiled gently toward Ethan. "Mr. Ethan Walker, would you and Lily please join me on stage?" Ethan looked genuinely surprised as the audience turned toward him. Lily squeezed his hand with excitement before whispering, "Daddy, they called your name." Together they walked toward the stage while warm applause filled the auditorium. Victoria greeted them with a grateful smile before presenting Ethan with a framed certificate establishing a permanent Hayes Community Technology Fellowship, funded by the company to provide refurbished computers, educational workshops, and technical mentoring for children throughout the city. This program will carry your name only if you agree to continue leading it exactly as you always have, Victoria said warmly. Ethan accepted the frame with visible emotion before answering quietly. "I would be honored, but I have one request." Victoria smiled knowingly. "I thought you might." Ethan glanced toward Lily before speaking. "Every workshop, every meeting, every responsibility must allow me to pick up my daughter after school whenever she needs me." Soft laughter and heartfelt applause spread through the room. Victoria nodded without hesitation. "That condition has already been approved." Lily looked proudly at her father before turning toward Victoria. "Thank you for helping my daddy help more kids." Victoria knelt slightly, so they were eye level. "No, Lily. Thank you for reminding all of us what success really looks like." She stood once more and faced the audience, but her final words were meant for only one person. There was once a question that remained hidden, because someone chose kindness over curiosity. I never received an answer out loud, yet today I finally understand it. Real beauty is not found in perfect photographs, impressive titles, or public admiration. It lives inside the quiet courage to protect another person's heart when nobody is watching. Ethan understood exactly what she meant, yet he simply smiled with the same gentle humility he had carried from the beginning. No explanation was necessary. Some answers were never spoken because they had already been lived. As father and daughter walked out of the auditorium together beneath the warm afternoon sunlight, Victoria remained standing near the stage, watching them disappear through the open doors with peaceful gratitude. For the first time in many years, the silence surrounding her no longer felt lonely. It felt like healing.